Well, it's getting really weird out there with the transgender state lawmakers. Not that it wasn't pretty weird already, it's just that it's getting even weirder because for people whose original premise was please just leave us alone, it's just about us, it's not about the kids, it sure keeps becoming about the kids. A lot. Of course, we have the ongoing saga of Zoe Zephyr here in Montana, outraged that medical licensure in this state will now be contingent on not surgically or hormonally altering children in the name of gender ideology. And at the same time, we have a case in Minnesota that, in ways, is a step beyond. An effort to remove language in state non-discrimination law that says no, being an actual pedophile is not a protected sexual orientation. What could possibly be the explanation or motive for that move? They say they have one. We'll get to that. But headline Alpha News in Minnesota, April 25th, DFL, that's their state Democrat party, DFL wants to strike anti-pedophile language from state statutes. This is part of an ongoing effort to modernize Minnesota's non-discrimination laws, as in the laws that prevent public accommodations from denying service or employment or housing or other opportunity on the basis of race or sex or religion or other characteristics, including sexual orientation. The authors of this bill to amend existing law call it the Take Pride Act. And they say they aim to add protections for gender identity, which don't currently exist, as well as remove existing language that says the state of Minnesota does not condone homosexuality, among other changes, including, yes, an updated definition for sexual orientation. And that sexual orientation update is at least the implied devil in the details here. More on that in a moment. But this Take Pride Act is in part the work of State Representative Lee Finke from St. Paul. Finke is the first openly transgender state legislator in Minnesota history, taking office in January. Now, you may remember Finke as USA Today's 2023 selection for Woman of the Year from Minnesota, a historical nomination in the award's newly created penis division. Just kidding. It's not even historical anymore, actually. It's just the norm, because of course, Rachel Levine already won the Penis Division Award just last year. Finke's bill was introduced in February, and it remains under active consideration, but last week, the Twitter account Gays Against Groomers caught that peculiar language, or more precisely, the peculiar choice to remove certain language from existing state law. Gays Against Groomers tweeted, "Breaking, a transgender representative in Minnesota has introduced a bill that will remove the exclusion of pedophiles from the protected class of sexual orientation. This means it will be illegal to discriminate against child rapists. This is what we have been sounding the alarm on. There is a concerted effort to normalize the sexualization of children and to legalize pedophilia. This is just one step toward that end goal." In response, Lee Finke said that Gays Against Groomers is an extremist hate group. They're very Trumpy. Implicitly, they're Nazi adjacent, or at least they're too relaxed with their Hitler comparisons. They welcome hate, Finke says, which is weird because I thought the whole premise was all are welcome here, but as usual, it means all except you. Regardless, we could grant every exaggerated premise in these accusations, and the most important question still remains. I don't care if Gays Against Groomers are Trumpy Nazis. The only question that matters is whether they're telling the truth, because the truth is still the truth, even if a Trumpy Nazi says it. So what is the truth here? Well, there is absolutely no question as to the heart of the accusation. Finke's bill does indeed strike existing language in Minnesota state law that clarifies explicitly, just so you guys know, when we're talking about non-discrimination against gay people, sexual orientation does not include a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. In other words, you are perfectly legally square to discriminate against pedophiles under Minnesota state law. And Finke's bill would delete that language. Where Gays Against Groomers may be overstating some is in the claim that this bill, if passed, would make it illegal to discriminate against child rapists. The bill does not say that explicitly. It's just that the newly created ambiguity about what is and is not a sexual orientation could certainly trend that way in court interpretations. Aaron Walker has a good analysis over on Twitchy. This bill would not say that pedos are protected, but in lacking clarity, it leaves room for a judge to understand the law that way. The existing no pedo clause would block any chance of that loose interpretation. Furthermore, by removing the no pedo clause, the Minnesota State Legislature could be understood by the courts as sending a signal that they're at least agnostic about protecting pedos. Plus, the ambiguity would open the door to activist litigators who may seize the opportunity to sue their way into new civil rights protections. But this author's final point is the most crucial one. Why even take out the no pedo clause at all? What is the downside to leaving it in the law? Because if we all agree that civil rights protections do not and should not extend to pedophiles, then what is the purpose in removing the statutory language that just says that outright? Finke and the rest of the bill authors do have a response to that. They say they're attempting this move because the current legal language perpetuates the stereotype that gay people are attracted to children. How? It separates these two things, actually. The law says that gay people are over here and pedophiles are over here, and these are not the same thing, and they should not be confused for one another. Oh, but we want to make sure that these concepts aren't conflated. By deleting their distinction in the law, how does that make any sense? It doesn't. And that's why the response isn't clarification, it's just screeching. Once this attempted removal of the no pedo clause became publicly known, the news was circulated by many, including some other Minnesota state legislators. Dawn Gilman, a Republican representative, retweeted Gays Against Groomers, and she says for that, Finke aggressively approached her and yelled at her and intimidated her on the House floor. She says it was treatment that wouldn't be tolerated in other workplaces, I would think, especially not if the realities of the gender dynamic were acknowledged. A giant man berating a woman. According to Alpha News, that description of events is corroborated by multiple state reps who were there. The Republican representative was escorted to her car after the session at her own request. As news outlets and social media have picked up the story, Finke is victimizing himself, of course, instead of more clearly explaining the intent, or better yet, just saying, whoopsie, that is not at all what we were trying to do, and we get why you're pissed off about that, and we're fixing it. Finke is blaming media mischaracterizations and your inability to understand that his bill changes nothing about the statutory definition of sexual orientation. Even though it does, it removes language describing what sexual orientation is not, which is indeed part of the definition. But Finke says that valid criticism has just been a whirlwind of hate intended to hurt him. More accurately, it's been a whirlwind of urgency to protect children from hurt. And even if some have been a little unkind in that urgency, that is the nature of the job of being a government representative. The people are supposed to hold you accountable aggressively. And if things get a little sideways in the people's treatment of politicians, good, because that's much better than the other way around. Part of Finke's defense is that none of this matters because the Minnesota State House has now fixed this issue by a unanimous vote. And indeed, they have addressed it in a unanimous vote on an amendment to a separate bill last week. The Minnesota State House added language to clarify physical or sexual attraction to children by an adult is not a protected class under this bill should it become law. Everyone in the State House voted for it, Finke included. And so Finke describes it as no controversy whatsoever. There was never a controversy, and there isn't one now. Well, then what's the problem if everyone agrees? What was thought to be a lack of agreement has now been clarified, and so this mistaken non-controversy is now over, right? Not really, because nothing is actually settled, at least not yet. That newly amended bill has cleared the House, but not the Senate yet. It is not, in fact, law. It still faces Senate consideration. So perhaps the Senate and the governor will refrain from deleting that no pedo language, but that is not, in fact, a done deal. And actually, the current version of the bill in the Senate, unless I'm misreading it, has the same original problem as Finke's bill. It strikes the no pedo language in existing law, but does not clarify with any new no pedo language elsewhere, though that too could be amended like it was in the House, assuming the political will is the same, which it probably is. But even if it's headed that way, nothing about the controversy is formally settled at the moment, and nothing has been explained as to why this is all suddenly non-controversial now. Because after all, remember, the original bill's authors certainly did see something controversial in existing law. That's why they wrote a new one to amend it. The bill authors invented this controversy that existing state law saying that sexual orientation non-discrimination protections do not extend to pedophiles is somehow mistaken or inappropriate, but none of that controversy has been resolved yet. In fact, the language in this new bill is almost exactly the same as the language in existing law, just phrased slightly differently, but somehow that's no longer objectionable. And the only thing that's changed is just a better public understanding of what's going on. That sounds a lot less like no controversy and a lot more like they just got caught. And now there's a more public fight that they know they can't win, and so they're standing down. That's not hate. That's not intimidation. That's not even unkindness, as Finke is characterizing it. That is the transparent representation of the people in their government. That is the system working, not the system failing. That is a feature, not a bug. Besides, it is kind, actually. Even the worst Twitter treatment is still comparably courteous, if not justified outright, given the seriousness of the subject here. So be thankful. Socrates got executed for corrupting the youth after all, and I think given the option, he would have much preferred the lenient sentence of a few mean tweets instead. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Gab, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.